Hello, I'm John from IconicRC. We're in lockdown at the moment in the UK. It's April 2020. I'm taking advantage of the extra time at home to bring you some overview and review videos. I used to do them about 5 or 6 years ago, but since then I've been filming at the track at our various iconic events such as the Iconic Cup, the Revival, the Buggy-thon, the Schumacher Challenge, etc. Those events are on hold at the moment in 2020. We hope to run them, or some of them. In the meantime, I've thought about some of the models that I've got here at home that I can talk to you about. I'm going to bring in an expert for these new batch of videos, someone a lot more knowledgeable than me to talk about the cars, and then I'm going to hunt down some footage and action shots, etc. that I've taken over the last 5 or 6 years at all of our events. So that's the plan, and today we are going to be talking about the ultra iconic Schumacher CAT XLS 4-wheel drive buggy from the UK manufacturer Schumacher Racing that was released in the late 1980s. This was after the iconic epic win from Schumacher Masami at the World Championships in 1987. This car, this XLS, once this was released after those World Championships, was, I would say, the four-wheel drive buggy to have. It was out around the same time as the Kyosho Optima Mid. You can see just how gorgeous that buggy looks. This is an original vintage version. So in 2017, Schumacher re-released the XLS. They called it the CAT XLS Masami. There's a box. It's a small box, but it's all crammed in there as a kit. So the CAT XLS Masami was released in 2017 in homage to that famous win. So that is in the famous Masami colours from the 1987 World Championship win. Genius move from Schumacher. We've been waiting a long time for them to get into the re-release market, and yeah, they just went straight for the big one, and this sold, and I know this for a fact, absolute bucket loads. It's still available now. It's a beautiful, beautiful recreation of that original CAT XLS. In fact, it's so close to the original, there's barely any difference. So like I said, this is a 100% original CAT XLS. Here I've got a re-release CAT XLS that I built as soon as these were released. I built it over several nights. It's I would say it's a fiddly build. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I'm Mr. Tamiya. I've built all sorts of different brands for reviews for RC Racer magazine, but this was my first ever Schumacher build, and I really did feel like I was back in the 1980s. It was absolutely fantastic. So what Schumacher have done is they've released this, but you can also get a hop-up transmission pack, so it can cope with today's brushless motors and modern electrics. This is built stock, this particular one, and I did actually build it to race it in the Revival in 2017. I never actually managed to get a chance to do that. Where is the body? I'll show you the body of that one. I'm not going to try and put it on, but yeah, those are the colours I painted it in. So that's an original, that's a re-release. What I'm going to do is bring in an expert. That is Iain Groom from Muzzoom Models. Iain is going to tell me about the differences between those two XLS models, the vintage and the re-release, and also try and explain to me the difference between the XLS, the XL and the original CAT. I do want to show you the original CAT there is Model Cars magazine, Radio Control Model Cars magazine from December 1986. So that's my magazine from all the way back then. And there is a review of a Schumacher CAT, the very first Schumacher competition all-terrain. December 86, like I said, Masami was given a long wheelbase CAT to race at the World Championships in the UK by Cecil. Nowadays, in the iconic racing classes, we hear people talking about the short wheelbase CAT, the CAT XL, there's two-wheel drive, the CAT XLS. I'm hoping Iain Groom can clear some of that up for me. I believe that the CAT short wheelbase is just really just the original epic Schumacher CAT. So I've got lots more to talk about, but let's go to Iain just to answer some of those questions. So yeah, Iain Groom. So all right, Iain Groom, Muzzoom models. How you doing?
Good, thank you.
Yeah, strange times
Bit,
indeed. But you're all holding up well, yeah? Is that where you're living out there?
Yes, it's my home now in Man Cave. Yeah.
Yeah, I've got a hideout in one of my daughter's bedrooms. I've lost my home office. It's just too noisy down there at the minute.
Yeah.
But I'm sure we'll soon be through all this. Thanks for joining me. I really need your help. I'm no CAT XLS expert. I've got some questions for you.
Fair enough.
I think they're pretty straightforward questions, so you should be fine. I know you are the Schumacher vintage aficionado. So really, first up, something that always bugs me. I've got that's December 1986 Model Cars magazine. Yeah.
Very nice.
No, I had that back then. This very magazine. I think most people know I was massively into my Tamiya's, but there was this awesome looking CAT. Yeah. Review. Something a little bit out of reach for me back then at the age of 13 or 14. But that's a CAT, yeah? That is a Schumacher CAT. But then, this is December 86, but in 1987, Masami rolled up to the World Championships. Cecil Schumacher gave him a CAT, like a long wheel-based version of one of those. And he went and won the 1/10th off-road four-wheel drive Worlds. Yeah, so we know all that, but where did the XLS come from? I've got these iconic vintage rules, and all people ever refer to is the CAT XLS or the XL, or the XL two-wheel drive. Yeah, but
Yeah.
what about this? Yeah, just the straightforward Schumacher CAT. Why does everyone call it the short wheelbase, for example? I know it is, but why not just the original CAT? So that's my first elongated question.
Okay. Well, first of all, the name CAT came from competition all-terrain, so that's where it started from. And as you say, the first one came out in '86, and it was just called Schumacher CAT. We now call that the short wheelbase, just to differentiate it from the later models which came afterwards. So in '87, it evolved into the CAT XL for extra long, or as they still used to call it, the geriatric CAT, because it was long wheelbase to make it easier to drive, basically.
Right. Yeah.
So short wheelbase is great for the pros, not so good for your average Joe. So make it long wheelbase, easier to drive, and people started doing much better with it in sort of domestic competitions and things. And then, as with all Schumachers, it seems, and particularly around that time, there's loads of evolution going on all the time with parts, and also third-party aftermarket parts and stuff being added to it. So during '87, the XL evolved with people making it wide track to maximise the width. Schumacher themselves changed the front bumper from the grey one on the magazine article you got there to the black moulded one that we're familiar with now.
Yeah.
And so they sort of made those changes, and then there's a front differential put in rather than the one-way spool, and all of this being done to make it easier to drive, easier to set up. And as is always the way, the top drivers get these sort of mods before everybody else does to try them all out. So when Masami won the World Champs, he actually won it with an XL,
Yeah.
but with various modifications that Schumacher had made. And then in 1988, Schumacher released pretty much what Masami won with as the CAT XLS.
Okay, and that XLS really was the game changer, wasn't it, at that time?
Yeah. It made it, the XLS was sort of all the refinements that you needed to that design to make it a more durable car, easier to set up, and faster, obviously, as well. So everybody gelled with it. And then there was this huge sort of swathe of aftermarket hop-ups that you could buy for it, and Schumacher made parts for it themselves. The saddle pack chassis is an option. You had MMS with the diffs, ball diffs and things. So there's all kinds of different things that you could buy to make it faster, stronger, or whatever you felt you wanted to do.
I think back then, compared to now, everything just evolved so quickly, didn't it? You know, we're talking about the end of '86 through '87 to '88, and this car has quickly evolved into something rather special. Now,
absolutely.
Everyone was going on about the CAT XLSs. Everyone was hoping Schumacher might dip their toe and start re-releasing. And a couple of years back, they finally did. So they brought back the XLS. They called it the XLS Masami. It's making a bit more sense to me now, so thank you. So the XLS Masami, it's a Riri XLS, but also a nod and in the same livery as the car that Masami won in. I've got some photos. I actually went with you to the Schumacher HQ, and I've got some photos to show of the actual car that won. I'll do that later on in the video. So I guess the question for me to you is, I'm just going to quickly show these two. They've got the bodies on. This one is an original XLS that I've been showing people in the video, and that is I'm getting really bad with these camera angles, but that's a Riri. So if I try and hold both of these up, I know they've got the body on. Original there, Riri there. You really can't tell much difference between the two. Now, I never built an original. This was the first Schumacher I ever built. It took me a few nights. I loved it. It was totally different from anything else I've ever experienced with an RC build. But I loved it. It was fiddly. I've seen a lot of people kind of complaining. Maybe they've been rushing these builds a little bit, because I didn't have any problem with it. It was just a bit fiddly, and it took a while, and you need a bit of patience. But I kind of truly sort of believed that I was building something from 1987, 1988. But with that, it really did. I really did start feeling the nostalgia. That didn't sort of make it much easier for anyone. Yeah.
No.
So, is there any real difference between the old one and the new one?
Not a lot. I mean, I think what you're saying and what I love about the re-release Masami XLS is how faithful it is to the original. When you're building it, part of the fun of buying a re-release XLS is the building of it, because it's like you say, it's like being back in 1988. You're building it in exactly the same way as it was built back then. You're cutting your fingers on screwdrivers and things like that. If you're messing it all up, it's great fun. So the few differences are, I mean, the biggest difference is the instructions. You've got proper modern instructions, which are easier to follow. The original manual was made up with photographs and hand typed pages and things, and it wasn't easy to follow what you needed to do in certain sections. Right. So that makes it a lot easier. And then as far as the car itself is concerned, there's a few differences. The rear suspension hanger, the fiberglass bit on the back, that's it. You can see it there just on top of the transmission tunnel. On the re-release that you've got there, it's a much more abrupt angle. On the original, it was a shallower angle. So that's probably the only visible difference from outside the car. It makes no difference to performance, and you can easily fit an original one just by turning the black mount upside down on it. So that's the only real difference there. Yeah. The transmission housing, the inner transmission housing at for the just in front of the motor, you won't be able to see it from outside, but the holes going through the chassis are just a couple of millimetres closer together, which means that the chassis is actually very, very slightly different to the original, just with those hole spacings. Again, if you wanted to fit an original to an old one or vice versa, you just got to slot the holes in the chassis with a file by a couple of millimetres, and then it fits. Right. So everything's interchangeable. And an odd little thing is the steering link, the fiberglass steering link at the front. Yeah. On the re-release, that's a narrow track link, which is what Masami used for his World Championship car. So it's faithful to his car. Yeah. But that was just a hangover from them in the process of developing the car to make it wide. They hadn't yet made a wide steering link. But when the XLS was released as its original kit in '88, it had a wider steering link. So it just helps with reducing bump steer for your racing. That's all. And the only other thing that I can think of as difference really is it uses posi screws instead of slot head screws.
Yeah, I was going to say, I have to say, I was so glad I didn't have to build this with flathead screws, mate. Yeah, God blimey. So crosshead screws. Yeah. You mentioned the steering. I've seen a few comments about people just having trouble assembling that steering. I've had trouble with it at all. I believe it works okay. I have run this, not much, I have to admit, but people say that you're best to not follow the manuals and do it a bit earlier than the manual suggests. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah, when you're building it, the manual says to fit the top deck quite early on. Yeah, and then a few stages later on tells you to fit the steering to the top deck. The steering is quite fiddly because it's M2 screws and nuts, so it's you're trying to deal with small things, and you've got to use a bit of thread lock and stuff like that. So it's much easier if you assemble the steering onto the top deck first before you fit the top deck. So it's almost that you build the steering at the very beginning of the car, really, is the easiest way to do it. All right. And the steering kit itself, it works all right. It's but because it's such a faithful car to the original, you sometimes just have to fettle things a little bit to get them to work really, really smoothly. And the steering is one of those things that there's a little brass bushing that runs through the centre of the steering arm, and occasionally you just need to gently sand down the steering arm by just a fraction of a millimetre so that you can clamp up tight against that brass bushing and it doesn't bind the steering. A few people just sort of kind of expect it to go together a bit like a Tamiya, where you just bolt it together and it works straight away.
It's not like a Tamiya. I think the thing that got me when I built this was just the whole tensioning of the belt, and you're just doing it as you're actually assembling it. The first time I tried to run it, it didn't run, and not wishing to name drop or anything, but I was with Jamie Booth at the time, and he just grabbed it, did something, held a cup, whip, there you go, mate, and sorted. It was perfect. So there you go. Now you Muzzoom models, you produce. I mean, you're a Schumacher reseller for starters, but you also produce your own hop-up parts for vintage.
That's
I think you do a steering set. Is that for the XLS?
It is, yeah.
So very good there. You've explained the steering setup and how to do it properly, but you've come up with your own design as a hop up part, yeah.
Yeah, well, I can't claim too much credit for it because it's actually it's based on the original Wasp Racing hopper
Right.
they made.
Yeah.
I think they made it for. I think it came out around the crossover between the XLS and the Pro CAT. It's sort of that era. But I've mine's 3D printed rather than machined out of nylon.
Yeah.
So I had to make very slight changes to make it strong enough out of that material. And I've also just shortened it by 0.5 millimeter, which means it now fits Boss Cat as well. And I've also just made a couple of little changes to give it some clearance, so you can fit it to the earlier short wheelbase and XL, which are narrower, so that it doesn't foul on the steering mechanism for those. So it's becomes a sort of one-stop shop, one steering kit, fits all of that generation of CAT cars, and it's ball raced as well. So it's a bit smoother, and it's a bit more like a modern car in the sense that once you fit it and you set it all up, you don't have to touch it again. It just works. So that's a lot of people like it.
Yeah. What else do you do for the XLS?
So the XLS was the first one that I started making parts for because I was doing it for myself. So and it just sort of happened by accident that I worked out that if I made batches of 10 of things and sold 9 of them, then the 10th one was free for me. So that kind of worked. Yeah. So I've got more parts for the XLS than anything else, just because that was the first one. So we've got the steering kit we've mentioned. I make the wide track steering link, so if you want to correct that steering geometry, you can do. I make a replica of the MMS differentials that used to be really popular back in the day. So they're really good and strong, reliable, but they just sort of hold the belts in place a little bit better, and right. People like the nostalgia as well of that.
Yeah.
We make Teflon shock pistons for the original shocks, which because the original shocks, again, just like the re-release shocks, just like the original ones, have a very basic piston design, like a notch taken out rather than holes.
Yeah.
So we make these Teflon pistons, which are very, very smooth, and then they also have holes in them, just like a modern shock does, to better control the flow of the oil. I make a replica saddle pack chassis, so it's a copy of the one that Schumacher offered as an option back in late '87, I believe.
Is that chassis plate?
That's right, yeah, just the lower one, yeah. So the kit one's for a stick battery, and the re-release they make a holder for a shorty. So I do the saddle chassis, and we now do holders for that, which can either hold saddle lipos or shorty lipos, and it gives you a range of positions to put them in.
I did. I went old school with this one, as you can see. I just set it up for you could call it a NICAD stick pack. I kind of thought, why did I do that? But I did. To go back and correct it. It's I would say with these, there must be fun in the pits. If I think you need a bit of time before your heats if you do have to do a bit of work on these.
Absolutely,
yeah.
Trying to rebuild something in between races is a tough call on these.
Well, yeah, I can imagine. Where can people go to look at your parts list? Then what's the best place? Straight to your website.
Yeah, you go to the website, which is muzzoomodels.co.uk. Yeah. Or you can go to the Facebook page where I'm always sharing pictures and projects and things. And there's a shop now link at the top of that, which takes you straight to the website.
All right. Is it just remind me? Is it just vintage parts that you produce?
It's aimed at vintage Schumachers primarily. I do offer modern tyres and oils and things like that because obviously people use those to race vintage cars still.
Yeah.
And we're also trying to expand to cover other manufacturers as well. So I've got a few bits for Kyosho and Tamiya, and I'm looking to expand on that in the coming months.
And I was going to ask you about your plans for the future. So you are going to um, add other manufacturers into your portfolio.
Yeah, it just sort of works. One of the things I make is lipo holders for various Schumachers, and the basic design stays the same, and you just tweak it to fit different cars.
Yeah.
And then people start coming to me with Kyoshos and things. Could I make them to fit those? And it's like, well, yeah, if you give me the dimensions, I can do it. So that's what we're doing.
Are you into your on-road racing, or really just?
I'd love to. I've always wanted one of the Group C cars. Always wanted one. But yeah, but I've never really raced on road, and I'm trying to be realistic with my collection. It's large enough as it is.
The reason I ask is just I know some of the the older on-road chassis. There's trouble getting batteries to fit. So I just thought it's something you could look at. Just with say the old Tamiya's, for example. People are having to hack up some of the older chassis to get modern lipos to fit, that sort of thing. Especially the Tamiya's, which are, some of them were designed so that Nike could fit so snugly. But yeah, all right, interesting stuff. I am gonna go off and add some footage of some of these XLS's racing. I'll try and find your good self-racing one at the Revival as well. Remind me, you raced with a Fat Cat body shell, don't you?
Yeah, up to 2018, I ran the Fat Cat, and then last year I ran a re-release standard XLS.
I might as well ask you the question then. So that's the original Schumacher CAT XLS shell. Obviously, slightly longer body shell than the original CAT, which I suppose I'm just going to have to call the short wheelbase, even though it's the original CAT. I've got to toe the line and do what everyone else does and call the short wheelbase CAT. That just quickly then, that Fat Cat body shell, it's not as pretty as the original.
How dare you? It's beautiful.
Why though? Why is this batteries? There must be a practical reason for it. That shell.
It's an aftermarket one made by Palmer, and it's just a wider version. Basically, it kind of carries the same sort of lines, but it's wider. It's also more of a cab forwards design, and it just gives much more interior space.
It is for interior.
Yeah, and it also fits the Pro Cat. So I think it probably came out again. I know that there was some aftermarket chassis being made for the XLS, and then the Pro Cat itself came out, and they all had sort of wider chassis. And of course, the Fat Cat body shell fits around all of those. And obviously, with an XLS, you could just overhang the electrics from the chassis anyway. So it just gives you much more space to play with inside. The short wheelbase in particular was such a tight squeeze for the electrics, and then they made it a bit longer with the XL. You could fit a bit more in there, but it's still difficult. And back in the day, obviously when electrics were a bit larger anyway, you would often have either the receiver or maybe even the speed controller sat on top of the belt in the middle of the car. And obviously today we want to avoid that because we're not used to it doing that with modern cars, like keep everything low. So having that bit extra space kind of helps.
All right, cool. We'll dig up some Fat Cat footage,
Awesome.
So the people watching this can see what you mean. All right, mate. I really appreciate this.
That's all right.
Thanks for joining me. I might try and convince you to come back to talk about the Pro Cat because you built me a lovely Pro Cat.
That was great.
I need to show that one off, so I might try and invite you back. So I would just say enjoy the rest of your Easter bank holiday Monday, and I appreciate your time, Iain. Cheers. Okay, that was lots of fantastic information from Iain, and I think we've all learned something there. What I want to talk to you about now is the history of that CAT XLS at the IconicRC revival. Our first revival was in 2014, so long before the re-release. We had a few CAT XLS's entered. That we had a kind of huge span for that original four-wheel drive class. It went from the 70s right the way up until about 1988. So eligible for that class were the original Tamiya Hotshots, for example, in four-wheel drive, the Optimas, the Optima Mids, PB Mini Mustangs, and these Schumacher original vintage CAT XLS's. So we had some guys turn up to the revival racing these. They had a few issues, you know, these things hadn't really been raced much. I don't think there was a competition vintage racing event in the UK until 2014 when we had that revival. So just off the top of my head, Daniel Rowlands brought along a CAT XLS. Jiffy Giles brought along a CAT XLS, and so did James Smith. Now James had lovingly recreated the original Masami winning livery on his XLS. By that time I was contributing to RC Racer magazine in the UK, reviews, race reports, and I sent off the report of the 2014 revival, and we were lucky enough to have this shot of mine on the front cover. That is James Smith's CAT XLS in the Masami colours. So that was long before the re-release. I'll show you that box again. So there again we can see those original Masami colours which James recreated. Now I'm going to show you some photos of the original CAT that Masami actually won those World Championships with. I was lucky enough to be invited along to the Schumacher factory and had a tour hosted by the wonderful Dave Foster. So I'm going to show you some photos of the original Masami CAT along with a couple of photos of the trophy as well. I went that day with Robert Jakes, and yeah, it was a fantastic tour, and I'm very grateful to Schumacher Racing for allowing us to have a look at that trophy room and have a little look behind the scenes at Schumacher Racing in Northampton. So let's see those photos. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about the re-release again. I've got another version here because I love these so much. You can't actually, I don't think you can get the colour scheme wrong for a CAT XLS. It's a bit like a Tamiya Sand Scorcher in that you can just paint any colour, any just random colour or colours, and it always looks absolutely epic. So this one here has got the hop-up plated wheels. So the original re-release came with the straight black wheels there. This has got the lovely chrome hop-up wheels. You can buy every single individual part for a re-release CAT XLS, and more than likely it's going to fit on your vintage as well. Iain, since I spoke to him, has pointed out that you do need to watch out for shock shaft size between the vintage and the original. There's some of those plated wheels, all you know, the price that you want to be paying as well. This here is a wing mount. I couldn't find a wing mount for my original for love nor money. Just could not find one. Now, no problem at all. And it's an exact match. Yeah. So lots of hop-up parts from Schumacher, and a reminder that Iain at Muzzoom does some very tasty parts as well. So anyway, the revival, we've spoken a little bit about the inaugural revival event in 2014. If we fast forward a little bit to 2016, my friend Daniel Rowlands was over in the UK holidaying from the Oman. He was out in Oman working for an oil company. He was back with his family. He was racing at the revival, and he was also invited down to Schumacher Racing in Northampton to have a little chat about this upcoming release. I'm showing you that box again. So after the revival, Daniel popped down to Schumacher and he helped him a little bit. I think he took down a re-released Kyosho Optima just to show them how Kyosho had handled the whole re-release thing, and I believe that may have been instrumental in Schumacher deciding to also release that hop-up transmission. But nevertheless, what I can with confidence say is that Daniel Rowlands had a hand in the creation of that CAT XLS Masami re-release. Now, unfortunately, we lost Daniel Rowlands before Revival 2017. It was very, very sad. We all loved him. He had loads of mates, loads of friends in the vintage RC scene. So it was a very, very emotional day at the 2017 revival, where we first started to see lots and lots of these re-release CAT XLSs. I just want to show some photos of Daniel. I think it's only fitting, I definitely needed to include the main man. I call him Mr. Iconic in this video. So let's see a couple of pictures of Mr. Rowlands. Okay, so now we're going to show you some footage of the XLS's racing. I've got some footage from past revivals, past iconic events, got some action shots. I've also got a pit interview at the Schumacher Challenge with now Shah Jungly. So now Shah is going to be talking about his vintage CAT XLS that he ran at A1 a couple of years ago. Now Shah was a good friend of Dan Rowlands, and now Shah actually built the first kit off of the production line of that re-release XLS. So that was model 001. He built that with Dan Rowlands, and he's now the proud owner of that particular model. I'm just having a look here. I've got number 7. This is number 72, but it's batch. If you're into all this, it's batch 48154. So I think this is way further on than that 001 model. But yeah, anyway, so let's now see some action video. We'll see now Shad, we'll see some action shots of all the wonderful Schumacher CAT XLS cars that we've seen in recent years. Alright, now Shad.
Hi.
Alright, so we're now Shah Jungly here. First pit interview at the inaugural BMR Schumacher Challenge, which is being held here today at A1 Racing. Now Shad, you are running this fantastic XLS. There's 2 heats of XLSs, but it's very clear that this one is most definitely a vintage.
Yeah, so yeah, John, thanks. Yeah, I bought this about 3-4 years ago actually. It was found on the Uber forums, and
Right.
bought it from a chap in Ireland actually. And this was clearly before the Riri came out, and it was in the right state. Let me show you what it's like now.
Wow.
So yeah, I mean, I've gone for, in terms of the electric setup, because it's all the brush setup.
Yep.
And here we've got the actual servo that Masami used in his winning XLS in '87, the KO Propo PS87. But the rest of the electrics all brushed, but not quite era representative. But
Okay.
the whole chassis is vintage.
Yeah, you can tell.
You can see that the sort of the G10 is kind of yellowed over.
Yeah, we love a bit of yellowing.
Yeah.
So how long did it take you to find that servo? Are they quite common?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of digging around really. I mean, looking on the forums,
Yeah.
looking on the internet, contacts. But yeah, they're a very popular servo back in the day.
Yeah.
Very quick. It's still used, I think, today in some setups, but certainly a prize servo to find in a vintage setup these days.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's very quick as well.
All right,
It works perfectly. Yeah.
so how are you doing then? We're
Yeah, not too
through
bad.
round 1 of 4.
Yeah, so going into the second round, it's not too bad. I'm a bit slow, but I've kind of purposefully wind things down because I'm not a pro racer. And the aim of the game is just to get around the track and not break anything.
Yeah.
And I'm doing that so far. I think the tyres could change a bit, but I'm a bit limited today with what I brought with me.
Wow,
so
yeah,
just,
interesting block tyres on.
Yeah. So front kind of rib style tyres and rear
Yeah.
blocks. Yeah, I think as the track dries out, I think they'll be they may be a bit better, but at the moment, yeah, a bit slippy.
All right,
But no,
okay.
it's good.
All right, thank you, sir. Good luck.
Cheers, thanks, John. All the best.
Okay, so that was our overview of the Schumacher CAT XLS. I want to say a big thank you to Iain Groom of Muzzoom Models for taking the time to speak to me. That was a great chat, so thank you, Iain. I want to wish all of you and your families all the best at this current time, and I'll be back soon with another IconicRC video. Cheers!